my best. Well, I want to thank the organization to let us to present our job. I want to say with this introduction that we are not here to discuss socio-political issues that sustain and feed an exaggerated economic and commercial utilitarianism to the detriment of a more humanistic approach to knowledge of the problems of human beings. This manifesto by Nuccio Ordine can help us to think about our practices in the field of mental health. The proposal reveals to us the danger that looms around our knowledge when we verify that behind the grandiose declaration in defense of mental health, there appear purely commercial. I want to use a sentence from Edgar Morin, who says, safeguarding the negative has become an absolute institutional urgency. Increasingly, we find ourselves with insufficient responses from a biomedical model to address mental health problems, with numerous criticisms appearing of the usual work of the institutions that provide assistance to affected people and revealing no few inconsistencies in the study designs that have been supporting some treatment supported by evidence in clinical guidelines. In this context, a careful reflection is necessary. Just as we ask people, families, patients, to think about what happened and the relationships that could have led to the problematic situation, we should set an example by thinking and honestly debating about our practices that are very far removed from the experience of the people we serve, taking refuge in the technique that becomes an ideological framework that limits other modes of mental health more focused on subjectivity. By suppressing the subjective dimension, we are eliminating the individual as an agent of his own questioning about what is happening to him. There is a substitution of the symptom in the classical psychoanalytic sense for a very particular contemporary discomfort with some significant characteristics that we find in the current epidemiological horizon. Perhaps it's not time now to debate the psychodynamic consideration of the psychotic experience, just to expose that derived from a current tendency individualist and the rejection of the emotional ties, a kind of narcissism emerges that protects from the disturbance of discomfort and moves to the other, the suffering part, the conflict. If the others are affected, it is important to broaden the perspective of care, and this firstly reaches the family group. When we look at the families, we can see three levels of interaction: historical, socialization structure, and relational matrix. Within the family, dynamics are articulated in a complex way, integrating intrapsychic process, cultural aspects, and social interest in a broad sense. They determine each other reciprocally and from that context, the behavioral expression of an individual can be characterized as emerging from the family group. The psychoanalytical oriented multifamily therapy group, GMT, seeks to sustain a framework of relational encounter in which basic access of trust and security are consolidated, so that a therapeutic experience can take place. An experience that transforms the participants with an artisanal vocation and a restorative aim. The elementary and essential operation of searching and interpreting signs, reviewing and reconsidering our particular way of seeing the things that happen to us, that concern us beyond the individual record. And it is necessary to combine the review in the different members. In a family group, each one has experienced the facts surprisingly differently. This seems more important when the outbreak of psychosis has turned the life course of a person and a family upside down. The way in which the different members of a family reconstruct the past is fascinating and scary. The space formed by the multifamily group allows a network of identifications between the members of the different families that facilitates emotional exchange while softening intra-family tensions. A labyrinth of mirrors that give us fragmented images of ourselves. The thread that accompanies us on this journey is the world. Words that have been distributed inequally in the context of families. Words that, beyond the meaning, establish different hierarchies of power. Words that, due to the relative distance between what is said and the thing itself, establish a virtuality in the relationships of the participants that allow historical, even genealogical relationships to be recapitulated. Words that, established as gains over a real loss, allow us an opportunity to understand the value of metaphor in the essence of human knowledge. When we contemplate things with our lives, it seems to us that we are getting closer to their mystery. But what happens is that later, it turns out that we move away again because we stumble. And we stumble precisely on that which we could also get closest to with language. This is a sentence from this Spanish author. And to finish, I want to share with you a small fragment by Jorge Garcia Badaracco. We use the freedom we have to talk about them, the patients, the crazy, in the words of Garcia Badaracco, to be able to remain silent about our issues. This makes us communicate to others without realizing it what we do not know. We dare to say from ourselves. Without knowing it, we are often looking for the interlocutor capable of rescuing us from our self-deception and our self-ignorance to cover our mouths from our own suffering of not having been recognized and loved, from our very personal needs. This is how crazy people facilitate the communication of things that are difficult to say, but worthy to reflection. Jorge Garcia Badaracco. And just to say thank you and give the word to Manuel back. Thank you very much.
Okay, Rafa, thank you for your words, and I will continue. I share my slide too. Okay. Do you see my PC? Well, each coordinating team, according to their training and previous life experience, vivencias in Spanish, that is, according to their cross conceptual, referential, and operational schema, or ECRO in Spanish, their vital moment and their work, social, and institutional context will lead the multifamily group. This articulation of perspective produces me an integrative and eclectic model, which draws on complex thinking in continuous self-questioning. Theory mutates, changes every day because we are showing people. Therefore, I will talk about nuclear elements in my daily work in a community mental health center in the Spanish public health system and about my theoretical vision of multifamily groups. First, the task. The operative group technique is explicitly centered on a task, any task. For example, to improve communication in the family. Under this explicit task lies another implicit task, which tries to break, by means of elucidation, the stereotype patterns that impede learning and communication, thus acting as an obstacle to any progress or change. Badaracco says that it is about coordinating the dialogues and or conversation that can take place in a group. Although we can act by letting the participant start speaking spontaneously, I consider that it is more effective to start by making a personal intervention in order to create a climate that allows them to better position themselves in the overall task. Explain in general terms why we are meeting, the frequency with which we are going to meet, the type of group, whether it is open or closed, who are the people we are going to add as coordinator, and what we expect from the participation of those present. Be as spontaneous as possible, also respecting the need to speak or not that each person may have at any given moment. In this sense, each group will take on different characteristics as event occurs. It will always be about creating a favorable evolutionary climate for creative exchange. At first, just tolerating it is enough. Later, when the group grows, sorry? At first, just tolerating it is enough. Later, when the group grows, it moves away from the technical. Second, involve the institution. The relationship with the institution must be formal. Alone, we are not going anywhere. The group usually creates envy because it is a potential space of power, therapeutic, obviously. For the group to be effective in our public health system, it is necessary to include the bosses, inform them, involve them, so that the institution doesn't boycott it. Open setting disturbs the task. The setting has a need and condition for work to be done. The most fragmented part of the members will be deposited in the setting. Once the dashboard is the same for everyone, it can be better analyzed and interpreted. Emergent reading makes a hypothesis of group fantasy, connects the individual and the group, which is amplified through the spokesperson. Give information about the group moment, fear of loss, fear of attack, confusion, hope, or sadness. Highlights the resistance, turns the implicit into something explicit, and promotes change. The change will be a new way of connecting and talking to each other. The group obtains a greater therapeutic effect when the task is homogeneous for everyone and the members are as heterogeneous as possible. Different diagnoses, different members of the family group, and other individuals in the social network. Since its origin, systemic family therapy has emphasized the importance of relational factors in the onset of development of psychosis. Disconforming triangulation is not the cause of psychosis, but along with other relational factors, is a high risk factor. Then, family therapy for psychosis can be understood as a process of reconfirmation for the patient. Everyone will know that if one speaks, it is because there is another who listens. But why does this core idea sometimes not occur in families? Recognition is a psychological movement of a primarily cognitive nature, which consists in accepting the relational existence of another person. Lack of recognition generates disconfirmation, which is the perception of one's own non-existence in relational terms. Recognition implies a perception of the needs of the other, as opposed to what we find in disconfirmation, in which they are subordinated to the needs of the interlocutor. What is more, the entire process is implicit, which further hinders the understanding of the phenomenon. For example, when we ask the son, the mother answers. The multifamily group offers a social context where there is a unique opportunity for the assigned patient to assert himself through his own narrative and can identify with himself, finding herself, producing an echo of recognition of what he says through the rest of the members. Once the patient is recognized by another and feels worthy, he may be able to feel like someone important, recreate and identify himself to his liking, have the ability to decide about himself and his action. When this happens, recovery is very close. My last slide, the supervision. In Spain, we say 4 eyes see more than 2, because institutional change affect the coordinating team and can modify setting. Therefore, it will be the supervisor who points out the this circumstance so that the appropriate measures can be taken. Coordinating team constantly contaminates the setting. Therefore, another, the supervisor, must analyze our unconscious parts that occupy the group. Thus, our awareness or our lack of awareness will be continuous and our desire for learning maximum. Okay, thank you for hearing me and continue, José Luis.
José Luis, I don't think we can hear you, but you are unmuted, so could you check your sound?
José Luis.
¿Algún problema técnico, José Luis, igual, Manolo, o qué?
Sí.
Escríbele por WhatsApp, ¿no?
Sí. Y si no empiezas tú, Jesús, y luego
Claro.
continúa José Luis.
Por eso
Venga,
digo,
sí.
¿no?
Venga,
¿Vale?
pues empieza tú, Jesús.
Venga. ¿Se me ve? Pues creo que no se me ve, ¿no? A ver, bueno. Pero para empezar, un momentito, perdón. Vamos a ver. Es que para empezar, Manuel tiene que poner mi texto, claro. Si no lo pone.
No te vemos, Jesús.
Claro, no sé por qué no se me ve, porque antes se me veía, ¿no? Se ve solo la foto, ¿no? Parece, ¿no?
Sí.
Pues no entiendo por qué. A ver. Nada, ¿no? Se sigue sin ver, ¿no, Rafa?
Mm.
Pues,
Ahora
no sé,
estaba compartiendo pantalla José Luis, ahora ha dejado de compartir. Comparte tú, Jesús.
sí,
Comparto yo y te...
Eso, lo que pasa es que no se me ve. No sé por qué no se me ve. Yo tengo la cámara encendida, ¿está todo bien? Ah, espérate, para. Ahora, ¿no? Ahora ya sí se me ve, ¿no?
Sí, da igual
Vale,
que se te vea.
pon mi texto, ¿no?
Sí.
Venga. Cuando ponga el texto empiezo. Y lo vas pasando conforme voy leyendo, ¿no? Desde el principio. Vale. ¿Vale? Bueno, pues voy, ¿no?
Sí.
Bueno, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share this space for reflection on group and multifamily therapy specifically. My name is Jesus Salomon Martinez. I am psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and I currently work in a community mental health team in Vejer de la Frontera, a town in the province of Cádiz, in the south of Spain, as its coordinator. I'm going to try to make a series of reflections that I see can be useful to everyone about multifamily therapy. First, the operators. We will address the operators aspect. In our opinion, an aspect that is little discussed is the choice of therapeutic equipment. We think it is worth saying a few words. This section is not intended to say you can and you can't coordinate a group. That will never be of any use, neither for the group nor for the coordinator. But it is true that there must be a small common thread about the idea of mental illness, the ways to help, for example, and above all, a collective aptitude that can become a presence of availability that can be used by any component of the group of a constant form. That is the therapeutic team that is going to carry out the task of supervision and coordination of the group. Must be as clear as possible about what is intended and what are the limits. With these two expressions, we refer to, first, to the deep meaning of multifamily therapy, to the conviction that serious mental illness can be cured, that schizophrenia can be cured, for example. After we can speak about this question, no? The experimental attitude of a full availability in health, the permissiveness of contamination of the scenario therapeutic in a genuine way, simultaneous rescues when necessary, the expression of a true self with a therapeutic meaning, self-revelations, the difficulty surprise that will arise day by day, being connected with what is happening and with what is happening to us. Expanding on the previous concept, we will say that the task is to go from being to being available. Second, because the limits within multifamily therapy are very defined, although it seems that they do not exist, the possibilities generated by the group, which in some way we could think of without pretending to be more or less than any psychotherapeutic current or model, which are inexhaustive and infinite, must be at the service of what is possible in each particular case. The medical rule of helping without harming is essential, and also the realism that by observing the hypercomplexity of each case and the entire context, we will have a broader panorama to assess both the negative therapeutic reactions and failures, as well as the improvements and, why not, the cures. Each case, like each person's, ourselves, is unique, and its complexity is irreducible to diagnosis and medication. Only by articulating multiple visions will we be able to envision a personalized solution for each problem. The standardization of vision is intolerable for patients. We say that to address mental illness, we have to start thinking about the multiple hypercomplexities that generate and feed it, and confront them for that hypercomplexity. This technical position will help us with closer and better to the possible solution to the problems we are going to deal with. That is to say, also it may seem paradoxical. With hypercomplex thinking and approach, we obtain as a result an operational simplification of the problem. Second, the institution. Regarding the institution, we can give a few thoughts. Some difficulties that are clear, and the work philosophy of this group is not accepted at first. Depending on the intervention model, biological, systemic, cognitive behavior, or psychodynamic, that predominates in the service we will work, we will encounter more or less difficulties. Intervention has to be regulated, to be accepted and measured, to be able to be evaluated. This could be a problem if that open and flexible groups, such as multifamily homes, have a complexity per se, when it comes to being investigated. But in my opinion, this should not be a problem at the current time. In my specific case, I did a small job where with some scales, attendance data, medication, and income, I was able to neutralize the questioning, which is initially asked by the head of the service. They will always ask us, what is the group for? It is profitable. This work was presented at the National Psychiatry Congress in Spain in poster format. The group serves many purposes, among others, to be able to talk with patients and their families in a way it's not possible in another context. I mean, specifically, that for me, the most valuable thing about the group is the facilitation emotional climate of possibilities that are created among all its members. Also, it is usually not of interest to the institution. The profitability of a group is evident. All measuring parameters usually improve. The only difficulty is that the results are not immediate. You have to be patient. You have to believe it to see it. We could say that in a classic way, at least as far as I know and understand, that we have a pending issue in this aspect. My Italian colleagues have carried out work in this sense, to be able to share the data and give it a scientific format. I think it's interesting that those present here can read it and take some notes and ideas. Another aspect to discuss will be, where can the group be held in approach in different psychiatric services? I have noticed a certain resistance to carrying them out in hospitalization units. Remember that Dr. Jorge Badaracco designed and developed it in these units precisely. In my experience, personal and professional, the rigidity of the hospitalization units in Spain, make the start-up difficult, and we must be cautious and careful if we show this option and go slowly. Also, at the outset, I will say that it seems to me to be the most profitable place, so to speak. And within the patient admissions, we will have golden moments for the intervention, which in another scenario we will not have. For me, the ideal place is the mental health team, community team. It is here I feel most comfortable, and it is where I find the most possibilities for help. The diversity of patients, the geographic and care proximity, the presence of every life, the solidarity that emerges between equals, and the possibility of assistance are very valuable elements for the success of the task. We believe that the multi-family therapy device allows in a new, or at least different way, care that articulates various clinical, health, political, and economic aspects that will become necessary for us in the coming years. It opens to the community a true social health space where they can work and develop health programs, where social education, stigma, psychoeducational, psychotherapeutic, clinical, pharmacological, rehabilitative aspect, school guidance, organization of health service are worked or at the same time. A structuring of social resource, health education, prevention, and creates a breeding ground for this stigmatization of mental illness that produce a non-cicatrization of everyday human suffering, but at the same time provides a response to the same from health service, adaptive demand, and available resource. It is really about new way of thinking and a mental openness that enable clinical, health, social, structural, and professional functioning that is committed to improving health as a universal concept at all levels. So from this perspective, Multifamily therapy groups can transcend healthcare states and be present in other areas of society, where they can also be very useful. Due to characteristics of the group, the specific of the purpose, the universality of their content, the feasibility of their framework, clinical and chronological, the acceptance of technical material for their realization, that availability of the device and the sense of yes thinking. Badaracco. Their great usefulness, at least in our opinion, is possible in any social health structure. I will finish with some of the phrases that the group member says in the therapies, which I think are very significant and important. The group is a place where I can think what I never thought a good thing. I have to give birth to my son again to find out who he was. The group serves to communicate, and the best thing about the group is the good people. I believe that in the group, we talk about what affects each person. When you went to the group, all your ideas, all your affections, all your feelings fall to the ground. I had no idea how my daughter was doing. And most importantly, I had no idea who I was doing. I work with I am, not with I know. If you have to name the group, I will call it the friendship group. Thank you for everything. We have found here a door to our freedom. The worst of all, that is, I already know. At that moment, the world is lost. At first, I wanted to kill him, but now I understand that I can only hug him. Please tell my father to stop screaming at my life. Even if I hit him at home, nothing happens. We will never release that I love him very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jesus. Manuel, we'll try to go back to Jose Luis later, hopefully, but first, I want to thank you all so far. I do want to give the word to our colleagues from Buenos Aires. I'll briefly introduce them, and then we can move on with the meeting. So we have Dr. Maria Elisa Mitre, psychologist and psychoanalyst and director of DITEM Day Centre, member in didactic function of the Psychoanalytic Association of Argentina and member of the International Psychoanalytic Association, and Catherine Walter, psychotherapist, master in psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology and group coordinator at DITEM Day Centre. On to you,
Maria
Catherine
Elisa,
and Maria Elisa.
Open the microphone, Maria Elisa. You have it closed.
Well, first of all, I think you all know that I want to clarify that the family groups began in Argentina, created by Jorge Garcia Badaracco, and that we continue many groups here in my day clinic, DITEM, which is the same name as that he gave me of his clinic called DITEM. I wanted to say that I have a day clinic and that we have multi-family groups every day. We work every afternoon, 2 hours with all the patients and some families, and we have once a week at night a multi-family group opened to the society. I don't know how to say. So Caterina, can you read, please, Catherine?
I will read some fragments and Maria Elisa is going to make some comments, okay? So I start. After many years of working with severe mental patients within the context of the multifamily psychoanalysis, we consider it fundamental to work with the vivid emotional feelings, what we refer to as vivencias in Spanish. We talk about working with these vivid emotional feelings because they cannot be situated as memories due to being so intense and due to denial of the context in which they originated. The vivid emotional feelings is unfolded within the group, sometimes in the form of actings, and later it is transformed in memories contained within the very vivid emotional experience or feeling. Garcia Badaracco said, "The vivid emotional experience entails the essence of a difficulty one has lived through, and at the same time, the absence of being able to count on someone at the moment of undergoing that difficulty. When this experience is revived within a new context, in the sense of being able to count on someone, it allows for a gradual transformation of the vivid emotional feeling. When this is aroused, if it is pleasant, it transmits tranquility and relief. At times, the anguish which the uncertainty produced dissolves."
I want
Melissa,
to
you could stop me. Okay.
interrupt something. I want to say that one something very important that Badaracco changed, that said that in mind is constituted by interdependencias, reciprocal, interdependencias, and reciprocal. Ay, me sale como and mind is constituted by interdependences. Some pleasant and some unpleasant. Well, that's all. Sorry.
In the group, what can be attained are new emotional experiences which never existed before and which are vital for the psycho-emotional growth and the development of ego resources fundamental to face reality. What we can learn in the groups is what we can name as a learning coming from a vivid emotional memory. There are people who have grown up in surroundings in which they have been subjected to sickening reciprocal interdependencies. The ego has always functioned very dependent to others, subject to identifications which interfered in the completion of enriching emotional experiences. A predominance of experiences arising from alienating identifications prevailed, which shaped a false self. This false self blocked a growing up with autonomy and the development of one's own genuine ego resources, which are necessary.
Yes. But I want to say that the way we work, after we begin, and when we begin to the process, the therapeutic process, always in dependence of the others. We are identified with the aggressor, and we act as that identification that made us suffer. So in his book, Badaracco talks of the others and ourselves. That means that there is a continuous fight in our mind between the false self or the pathological dependence and the true self that aims to grow up, to appear, because the presence of those others to make suffer, that makes suffer the true self, don't let him appear. So our function is to rescue, constantly try to rescue the true self trapped in that pathological interdependence. Well,
I continue.
I think.
If we therapists are sincere in the encounter with the others, it is possible for them to trust and to count on us for the first time, possibly, and share painful situations which they were never able to share with anybody. We say that it is only when people feel supported that they can transform their painful, vivid emotional world into something pleasant. The framework of solidarity and true listening, which takes place in the multifamily groups, enables that when a vivid traumatic emotional feeling arises, it becomes possible to work through it.
It's very important. Badaracco said, for example, that that you have that sabiduría. How do you say sabiduría?
Wisdom.
Wisdom consists in respecting the vivencia of the other, even if we think that they are not right. That is wisdom. And well, we try to in family encounters to try to make because families are always, a mother is always referred to his child or his children. Well, he made me suffer. The child said, my mother makes me suffer. But we try as a third one, to begin to try to make the mother speak about her own life, and the child begins to know his mother for the first time, even when her mother begins to speak about her suffering, his own suffering, and the mother begins to know his child that she brings as a mad one, as a crazy child, begins to know his suffering, because behind the psychotic transference, that it's very important to work with psychotic transference in the group, and there is a vulnerable or a helpless child trying to the others understand that he is suffering, that he's not crazy, that he's trying, even if he's doing it in a wrong way, or shouting or reclaiming the psychotic transference. The real claim is that the others understand that he's not crazy, that he's suffering. That is the thing that made him crazy, entre comillas, that the fathers didn't realize, they never realized that behind that craziness, to say that word, but it's not real craziness, there is a vulnerable child trying to make them see that he's not crazy, that he's suffering. Even in the books, sometimes there is a patient shouting in a bad way, or, well, saying things in a really bad way. Some coordinator sometimes begins to fight with the identification, because he shouts as identified with the person that made him suffer. So he shouts in a bad way and bad manners, and the coordinator begins to fight with the identification. What the identification is the false self, and because he cannot see the true self behind the psychotic transference. In a group, there was a coordination. That's why it's so important to work with others. In a group, a patient was shouting in a bad way, and the coordinator began to fight with the identification. So we began to say, no, you are not furious, you are suffering. And always in the 80% the way we say that there's really suffering, the patient begins to connect with his own emotions and generally begin to cry or to express his suffering and begins to cry, or because that is his real claim. Please, I shout, I hate you, but the real thing is that I want help from or want you to understand that I'm really suffering and I need help. Caterina.
We take great care of creating an emotional atmosphere which differs from which is not a healthy one, an atmosphere in which it is possible to relieve the traumatic situation in a space of psychological security. We see mental illness as a mental condition originating from a background in which the sickening factors were often left behind in total darkness, as a secret or in the shadows. We know, as a result of our experience, that what generates mental illness are relationships of maddening reciprocal interdependencies, which leave scars because they were lived traumatically. We can proceed to operate more scientifically through the traumatic memory evoking feelings than through the symptoms. It is as if we have to turn a deaf ear to the symptoms. The task is to permanently focus on the true self, ignoring the symptoms and rescuing what we consider more authentic within what is said. Winnicott says, Freud was interested in curing symptoms, and we are interested in people who are alive, people who live and love. It is necessary to be very cautious at the beginning of a therapeutic process to monitor what is said or not said. If the patients perceive something in the way of a subtle criticism towards the parents, or we are after a premature detachment, it may result in leading to an abandonment of the treatment. We must avoid one-to-one individual conversations.
Catherine,
Yes, please.
I want to say that at the beginning of the therapeutic process, it's much more important how the way we say what we say, and more than the context itself. Because when the beginning of the process, patients are like babies. They express, they want they never had, nobody spoke in a nice way. They shouted at him. There was a terrible context where they were living. So the way we talk, the face is very, the body language, it's very important, because they never had a pleasant way of speaking, or they were always shouting or looking at them with in a furious way. So it's very important in the first time of the therapeutic process to speak in that way. And I want to say also that the most important, or one of the most important things we do is that it's very difficult for the patients to get cured or to be better if we don't work with the families. The families always, or sometimes, are worst than the so-called crazy sons or daughters, and we have to help very much the families. So we take care of the families in the same way as we take care as the patient. That is very, very important, because if the patient feels that we are criticizing the parents, we lose the patient. It's very important. It's very important. Since Badaracco didn't work very much with the families in that way, we now work every day with these families. It's very, very, very important. The craziness or the problems or the difficulties of the families, and they begin to speak about their own lives, and always they had terrible lives that if we didn't ask them, that neither the children or the group understands why the patient is so bad. Caterina.
We believe that a useful intervention for this not to happen is to say to the father or mother, why don't you tell us about yourself, or what was the relationship with your mother like? In this way, we can get them to start talking about their own story, the parents' story, with their own parents, to talk about themselves and from their hearts. Gradually, they manage to share vivid emotional feelings of suffering without referring to their children. It is then that the children begin to know the very self of their parents and realize that they too suffered. Thus, the therapeutic process of the parents begins. Nowadays, most of the parents of our patients are now like the named patient. Like our patients are, how do you say, alta? Bueno, Mauricio por ahí me puede ayudar. El alta clínico.
Discharge, clinical discharge.
Discharge. Okay, our patients have their clinical discharge, and the parents continue in the day center as patients. They are named and they ask to be patients of the day center. In our way of intervening, the way one says something is more important than the contents of what is said. The wording, the body language, and the way of looking at the person are fundamental. Let us remember that the severe patients have built characters from identifications with those others who threatened and frightened them at some given moment. Those vivid traumatic emotional memories were lived without resources to be able to neutralize them. That is why they remain so traumatic. Patients talk from those characters they take on, establishing massive transferences which are difficult to work on. That is why we always focus on the importance of working with others in the groups, like many therapists, as many as we can be. It's a way of putting us to the test to see if we have enough ego resources to tolerate that violence, and to see if we can put up with those others in them which inhabit them. In this manner, we are not trapped in what the characters express, and we can rescue that healthy virtuality which I referred to above. This is one way we use to dismantle those characters. We do not resort to strategies. The strategies, from our point of view, invalidate the vivid emotional halo coming from our interventions. Authenticity, a spontaneous setting, being available is what gets the patient to begin to trust more in us. Co-therapy allows for another professional to spot the healthy virtuality, which we may not be seeing at the time. A patient may be arguing from a character and the therapist begin to discuss with that character. The intervention from another professional rescues the former therapist by saying, for example, Pablo is very frightened and is shouting at us because it is a way of covering up his fears. To approach
And
the
we
patient.
also work, one thing, Kate, sorry, it's very important. We work with trying to well, I was saying to grow the true self behind the characters, and that's the way we dismantle the characters, and suddenly those people that were rough and shouted, and well, all in the psychotic transference, as I said before, they begin to appear. We begin to like them because they begin to change. They begin to say thank you, to recognize our help, and suddenly they transform themselves. There is a transformation where the identification of the character begins to change, and there is we always get very emotional when the real person or the true self begins to appear.
For us, to give a patient a hug, take his or her hand is not iatrogenic if it is done authentically. We believe too that the more emotionally vividly we speak to a patient, the better it is received. That is to say, it is spoken from one's own very self. When we perceive that someone cannot provide an answer to their parents or children's due to fear or a lack of words, we sometimes stand behind that person in a manner of dramatization or role play and express what we think the patient cannot yet express. This not only helps the patient, but the family and all of the group. Let us remember that when we speak to someone, we are talking to everyone. Many times we begin the group saying, I was thinking with regards to the last session, or why don't we continue with the topic of the misunderstandings? In this manner, the participants feel that they were thought of and taken into account. The more the professional is involved in the formulation,
that delirios, or ¿cómo se dice?
Delusions.
Bueno, pardon, sorry, illusions and are always, and we think that are always a defensive way to defend themselves from the unbearable reality of the suffering reality, no? So we don't try to make them realize that it's not truth what they're saying and all that. They need that illusions as they develop ego resources to leave them. I hope you understand, because this is very important. In the same way, when they are speaking from characters or from identifications, we try to, the symptom for us is the last thing that the patient leaves behind. He continues with a compulsion of repetition all the time because they don't have ego resources to connect with the unbearable reality of his suffering. So we know that in the group, when the patient begins to count on us, there is a real another atmosphere that he had when he was smaller, when he was a small child. He begins to have confidence in us and begins to speak from his real self. Caterine?
The willingness to listen to the psychotic world is related to a sense of intense respect, to the capacity to stand the underlying vivid emotional feelings and memories, and work creatively, building hypotheses to be able to think about the vivid emotional feelings and, if possible, one's own, and which empathize with those of the patients. In this sense, it is not a matter of listening to the psychotic world, but listen to the virtual, healthy world, the healthy virtuality which underlies in this world. We believe that the therapeutic process continues throughout one's life. The groups enable to open mental spaces which awaken new vivid emotional memories in others and in us.
I want to make a clinic example. For example, we had a patient who, with the mere noise of footsteps getting closer to the group, began to tremble and cry out, "Don't let my father in, he's going to destroy me." A therapist got close to the patient because she perceived that the patient needed a support which he had never had in order to speak up. The group, as a third party, allowed him to bind these memories to situations of psychological mistreatment on the part of his father, who always made him feel bad and feel he was a bad person. Bit by bit, he connected the traumatic, vivid vivencia of mistreatment felt his whole life with that father who rejected his homosexuality and humiliated him with violence. He was able to share in the group the vivencia, the memory of that vivencia of terror felt during his childhood, accompanied and supported by us. This was another clinic example. Well, sorry. Bueno, a patient remembers shouting and resounding noises from his childhood days. He and his mother had been subjected to all sorts of violence. His alcoholic father would throw himself onto Horacio and kiss him. Sometimes he would take hold of him by his hair and tell his mother that he would kill him. The boy lived this atmosphere with no one to contain him nor explain anything. He grew to be a sort of robot, half alive, until one day he came to the groups. He had crossed identifications. On one hand, identified with the submission of the mother, he lived alert, terrified. At the other times, he was his father who would attack with no reason whatsoever. Well, in this type of patients, the psychism lacks autonomy and the compulsive functioning of the mind is always subjected to some other superego.
María Elisa, hay algo que está metiéndose en el micrófono, que hace como interferencia.
Ahora, ¿está bien?
Va, sí, dale.
This case was even more spectacular because what became evident was the reversibility of a psychotic process which was seen in action through a psychotic transference behavior. The calm and reassuring presence of the coordinator generated the transformation of a maddening vivencia into a painful, vivid memory. The silence and respect which prevailed in the group was a confirmation of the healing power that another person can provide when that other person has the ability to start psychotic violence and transform it with a context of healthy reciprocal interdependencies which provide security. Caterina.
That's it. Ahí estamos. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine and Maria Elisa. That was extremely interesting. We still have 15 minutes. I wonder if Jose Luis has been able to, regain his ability to speak.
Luis, start 5 minutes for you. Activa el audio. No se te oye. El micrófono. Then
Yeah, doesn't
I
seem to
think
be working any better. That's a pity.
Luis has a problem with.
It's a pity. I just I would like to leave the last few minutes for any comments or questions, but I had a question from myself. I'm going to try to make it brief for Catherine and Maria Elisa. From reading The Future of Multifamily Psychoanalysis by Dr. Garcia Badaracco, I noticed that he mentions that the space that's opened in the multifamily psychoanalysis group is one that the therapist themselves can benefit from. You, Manuel, mentioned that the therapists themselves come into the group with their own experiences and history and background, and I would add their family history and, of course, their history of trauma and their own neurosis. And they find a space that is therapeutic for all its participants. So I would like to hear any thoughts about what's the therapeutic or healing potential of the multifamily group for the therapist from either any of the participants today. Thanks.
But Mauricio, what you're asking is very important. I wrote a work in a book I wrote about the therapeutic process of the analysts, of the coordinators in the group of and the multifamily groups. I myself think that after many years of working in these groups, I did my own process, therapeutic process. For example, I speak about myself. We speak about ourselves also in the groups, and the patients feel a more symmetrical, is right, interaction between the patient and the coordination. For example, I had a terrible relation with my mother. I thought, for example, that she was that she didn't love me because she was very rigid and she never showed her feelings very much. So in the group, after years, she was not here anymore. That was a pity. I began to realize that my mother wasn't a bad person that didn't love me. That, well, I knew afterwards also that she was suffering a lot, and that rigid way of interacting with me had to do with her own suffering. So I forgave her, and I'm very grateful for all the things that she did for me. And I also see that many coordinators have changed working in these groups, and all of it. I mean, I want to say that nearly all of them do it. Sometimes they act as they really know everything in the beginning, and then they begin to need to realize they need to know a lot and to speak from himself, because the patients know exactly when we coordinators are speaking from our own selves or from our characters. They know immediately. They don't accept any interpretation done from a character, from an identification. Well, that's that. I don't know if I respond of what you were asking.
You absolutely have responded. Thanks very much for that. That was very moving. And Brian, I want to say we're very honored and privileged. Yes, please.
Mario, sorry, 1 minute for your question. And I believe that the therapist also helps by doing the homework, doing the group. It's an exercise in interdependence.
Yeah.
It is also true that the therapist is the responsible for the climate of emotional security and emotional mediator, no? But one thing does not take away the other.
It makes sense that the same gameplay of reciprocal interdependencies that occur in the family reproduces in the group, and the therapist is part of that, so to speak, new family. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And Mr. Martindale, for me, it's an honor for me to be able to share this space for mutual reflection. I would love to know what your opinion about what was said. I am very curious.
Thank you, and first of all, congratulations to all of you on your excellent English. I always feel ashamed. I always feel ashamed that my linguistic skills are so limited. I mean, all of you are speaking to the converted in the sense that I very much believe in the importance of family work from the very beginning of the encounter with the troubled person, and I have some experience of forms of multifamily group, and one of the most interesting things I think that benefited the kind of group that we had what were called educational days, when staff would give talks to the patients, but the most important experiences were when we provided lunch and coffee times, and the socialization aspect when staff would be alongside the patients. I've got, I mean, just a couple of comments related to what Maurizio was just asking. Some of you may know I co-edited a book on open dialogue, even though I'm not an open dialogue practitioner. I'm more the need-adapted approach of Alanen and so on with family work. But what was very interesting in that book was the training chapters, and I was very interested to read that one of the most important experiences of many of the trainers, those who are training in open dialogue, was the opportunity to have their own talk about their own families in a group setting during the training. And this was not just a couple of times, but it was a substantive part of the training that went on, I think, over many months. So you might say that, so because I was going to ask before Maurizio asked, I said, is it important for therapists to have had their own multifamily group experience before they start conducting the group? Because Maria was saying that her experience talking about her mother came many years after being in the group. But if one had been able to talk about one's own family of origin and understand these influences before one starts running, wouldn't that be better? So that's a question I have. But thank you all for your contribution.
For all of us.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that that we say that our mind is how we say, we work with all the family in our minds. No, I don't know if you are asking also that. For example, we have to discover in the group, or everybody discovers, when you are speaking, even in a one-to-one therapy, we have to discover, or we discover, when the patient is speaking, how his father, but it's better in the family group because the father is beside him and the mother and everybody. So we realize when the patient is speaking from his identified with his mother, on when he's speaking like his father, and so we work with all the family in the mind. For example, there was a very obsessive neurotic patient that he spoke in the 2-on-2 therapy. He spoke about his obsessions, that he had his shoe that had a spot, and that his fingers were not were dirty, and well, so this is, you're going to say this is terrible, but I fell completely asleep. So I couldn't stop, I couldn't bear more the obsession, and that the clothes, the clothes were not clean. They were, so he said, "You fell asleep." And I said, "Yes, because I'm tired. You're speaking all the time of yourselves. It's 1 year that I never showed an emotion, that you're always speaking about your shoe. So I want you to know that I can't help you anymore. I think I help you a lot, but tomorrow you are going to the group." So it was an exceptional way to, no, exceptional, no. So he began to go to the group, and the therapeutic process helped him a lot after all that he did in the therapy with me. Well, I don't know if I answer something.
Well, in my opinion, no, I think each therapist, no, lead, no, the multi-family group, no, as their trainer, no, open dialogue. Touch, no, systemic therapy, no, and I think, no, for the therapist it's important to know the family, to know the rules of the group, no, and to know the multifamily psychoanalysis, no. I think all these element, no, in our brain is important to know, no, how is the functioning of the group, no. I have a question, no, for my colleague of Argentina, no, because I don't understand, no, or I think different, no. I don't understand when you say psychotic transference, and in the same moment, no, you say he's suffering, it's not crazy, no. Why say it's not crazy, but you think with the psychotic transference, no? Because for me, maybe the transference is the same for all the person. Do you understand me? I can ask in Spanish.
María Elisa, abrí el micrófono, que lo tenés cerrado.
Sí,
dilo en español, igual Mauricio lo puede traducir. Dilo en español, igual Mauricio puede traducir.
La pregunta para las compañeras argentinas es que ellas hablan de transferencias psicóticas, ¿no? Pero también en la misma línea, ¿no? En el mismo párrafo comentáis, ¿no? Que el paciente simplemente sufre, no está loco, ¿no? Entonces, es un mensaje contradictorio, ¿no? ¿Cómo os aclaráis con este pensamiento?
In his suffering, no, sorry. Are you going to translate?
No.
I don't know.
You can.
Mauricio, el micrófono. Yeah, thanks. I translate simultaneously. It would be a bit of a cacophony rather than multiple voice choir. Do you feel able to answer to that in English, Maria Elisa? So yeah. Brian can understand and
I think, yes. I think he says that it's a contradiction to say that in a psychotic transference, people that are in psychotic transference, they are vulnerable people that are suffering. I know that they are suffering, and we are. That's what you said, isn't it? Well, I wanted to say that that's the most important thing that Badaracco discovered. It's ¿cómo se llama? ¿Cómo se llama? La verdadera Kate.
¿Pero qué quieres decir?
Virtualidad, the healthy virtuality.
Yeah.
We work with a healthy virtuality that is the true self, and we know from the first moment that behind the symptoms there is always a potential healthy virtuality that has to be developed. I don't know if I answer you, but we always work from the beginning, neurotic, psychotic patients, that we are working with the symptoms and the psychotic transferences or simple transferences, but behind those things, there is a true self that claims to open, to leave, to leave that presence, the suffering presences that are protecting him or not letting them be. So I think it's not a contradiction. Is that we work always. Badaracco always worked with the thinking in the healthy virtuality. That I think that not many analysts think it like that. I don't know. I'm sorry if I say something, but he's one of the most important discoveries or that he did was working with the health all the time with a healthy virtuality, potential virtuality behind the symptoms and behind the pathological transferences.
Thank you very much. I think this is an extraordinarily complex and interesting topic that Manuel touched, but unfortunately we're coming to the end of our meeting. I want to thank everyone who participated and who attended. I have recorded this meeting. Anyone who is interested in having the recording can ask it to whomever invited them. I wonder if anyone is interested to continue this discussion in some way or forum by email or something, but for now I'm going to finish it with a karakia. Thanks to everyone. Kia tau kia tatou katoa, te atawhai o te tatou ariki aihu karaiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, ake, ake, ake. Amine. Thanks to everyone. Have a lovely evening, day, or whatever in your countries. And see you next time.
Thank you, Mauricio. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mauricio. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year for you.
And for you.
And for you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
For you all.
Thank you for you all.
Thank you.